Have you ever wondered what's the difference between things like resin-crete and plaster of Paris, and why you would use resin-crete over plaster of Paris? Well, I'm going to show you that now, because there is a really big difference. And that difference is not only about mixing it, but it's also about the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it takes paint, and all that sort of thing. So it's well worth checking this video out, because I'm going to be using both the same in exactly the same mold and showing you what the difference is. So the first one I'm going to mix up is the plaster of Paris. And it's really important, like all of these things, to get as accurate as measurement as you can. Now, you use whatever units you want to use. I'm going to be using grams. And the plaster of Paris is mixed up as a 2-to-1. So 2 times powder to the amount of water that you would use. I'm going to mix up 200 grams of this. I'm not sure how much it takes of plaster of Paris, because I've not done these molds in plaster of Paris before. So if I need to mix up a little bit more, I can. And now I need 100 grams of water, and you're meant to mix this up by making a little well in here, and you want to handle it as little as possible, because what you don't want to do is add too many bubbles in it. So I'm going to add 100 grams of water. There we go. So that's exactly 100 grams of water. Those out the way, we don't need those there. And now I'm going to mix this in slowly. This will be a lot thicker than resin-crete, and this is one of the reasons why I find in the past I haven't had as good a result with it, because you don't get the details with this, and it will cure up quite quickly the more you move it around in here, where resin-crete mixes up a lot thinner. It's like thin milk. So with this, I'm going to pop it in there, but I am going to push it down into the bits to give it the best chance of making the mold. Tap it as well, which none of that you have to do with the resin-crete, as you'll see when I come to do the resin-crete one, because this makes what I think is called a Newtonian liquid. And this will take about an hour before you can demold it, where the resin-crete should be demoldable within about 30 minutes. I'm going to mix up a tiny bit more because I need a little bit more on there. There we go. So I've mixed up that, and now I'm going to fill that in, and I'll do exactly the same with the resin-crete as well. When I mix that, I will make sure that I have a bit like this that I have to fill the top on. Break that off there, because I don't overfill it. Give it a tap, because that should run nice and smooth, and then we can compare the two on how they work with having to refill them. So with the resin-crete, I'm going to measure out my powder, and for every 100 grams of powder we only need 30 grams of water. So I've got 200 grams there of resin-crete. I need 60 grams of water. There we go. So that's 60 grams of water, and this will mix up into a really nice, like, creamy consistency. But again, make sure that you've got everywhere mixed in and it's nice and smooth. You don't want to have anywhere that's got lumps in it. So that's nice and smooth, and we can just pour that now into this skull mold. Oh, I didn't quite mix enough up, but that's not a problem. I can add a little bit more onto the top of that. So now I've mixed up that little bit extra. That should fill that right up to the top. There we go. Okay, well, that's the resin-crete one all mixed up. So we'll put those together and we'll leave them now for an hour, even though the resin-crete you really only need to leave for 30 minutes, but I think we'll leave them both for the same amount of time. Well, I've written on the bottom of these as well, I've put resin-crete and plaster of Paris on them, and they've been curing now for just over an hour, both of them. I'm going to break off any little bits of overpour that I had on it. Now I'm going to demold gently, because this has only been curing for an hour, and these things do take longer than that to fully cure. Let's take that off gently. There we go. That's the plaster of Paris, and let's do the same for the resin-crete. Now, first of all, what I can see is there's a big difference. I don't know if the camera's picking it up in the whiteness. This one, the resin-crete, is much whiter than the plaster of Paris. The other thing is it has got a lot more details in it than the plaster of Paris, and as you can see, because it's thicker, there are quite a few bubbles trapped under that bit of the mold, where resin-crete, because it's a lot thinner, it gets into all those bits, and I can't see any bubbles on that whatsoever. But we're going to give this even further tests. The other thing is you can see the more details on the teeth as well with the resin-crete. My recommendation is always that before you do anything else with these, is you let them sit for 2 to 3 days to fully dry, because if not, you've still got quite a lot of moisture in these. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll leave these now to dry for 2 to 3 days, and we can then come back and do the final tests on them. There is a lot more bubbles on this as I look through it, actually, than anywhere else that would need work. These are all nice and dry now, and they've been curing for about 2 days, and I'm going to weigh them first to see which is the heaviest. I'll do it in grams, but you'll still get the same idea. This one is 349 grams, that's the resin-crete, and that one's 289 grams, so it's quite a lot lighter than the resin-crete. And when you're making things like this, you want a bit of weight to them, definitely. The other thing is I'm going to check the hardness of them to see how hard they are. I've got this precision instrument that I've ordered, and thank you to everyone that gets me a copy, because it's people like you that allow me to be able to order these sorts of things to do these experiments. I really do appreciate it. Your names are coming up now. So the resin-crete is at 70D, well 68D hardness, and the plaster of Paris is at 46D. So there's a big difference in the actual strength and hardness of them. Resin-crete, again, is much harder than plaster of Paris. We're going to use this test to see how well they take colour. So we'll start with the plaster of Paris. Now, I'm not doing anything fancy smancy with this. I'm literally just doing a test. I'm not going to try and sell these or give these away or anything afterwards. I'm using the same paints for both, and I'm only going to give one coat. That yellow looked like it took on quite well there. And the plaster of Paris is a bit more porous. It's sucking it in a lot quicker, and it's drying a lot quicker, which can be quite useful when you are painting. We'll leave that one to dry on the resin-crete. We can always dry it with a hairdryer, I suppose. Well, the silver's not given a great cover on the plaster of Paris. Silver does tend to be a little bit more difficult to cover, and so does red. They're both dry now, and they're covered really, really well. This is the plaster of Paris. I think that's covered excellently. And if I'm honest, I think the plaster of Paris first coat covered a little bit more solid than it did the first coat on the resin-crete. But these are both have had 2 coats now, and I really don't think there's any difference I can see in them. The only thing is, I hadn't noticed in the plaster of Paris one, there was another great big gaping hole there, and that is the trouble with plaster of Paris against resin-crete. Look at that, that's perfect. So to recap, the differences between the two are resin-crete, certainly a lot harder. You'll get a lot more weight from it. You get a much neater finish to it, and a lot smoother finish to the final casting as well. So there is a big difference between plaster of Paris and resin-crete. So all those people that were saying, oh, is it the same thing, or, you know, what is the difference? This is the difference. You'll get a much neater casting, a lot more weight to it. It's a lot harder, so it's not going to damage so easily. That will flake off. Look, I don't know if you can see that. That's flaking off under my nail, where that is not. So you can scrape that really easily. Look, there's dust coming off that and going into the eye, even though it's fully cured, where this one you can't, because it's much harder. It's a really different product. Both of them are eco-friendly, which is great. I'm really pleased I did that. Hope you found this useful. If you don't mind those skulls, actually, even though they are quite gaudy, I may do something with them and see if I can turn them into really pretty skulls. Move that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, get hold of anything that you want to get hold of that I've used, or become a member of my channel, or find my links to Facebook and Instagram, then everything that you need is in the description of this video. Take care. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy your resin. Bye.